Hello, everybody. Welcome to this new section of my reviews of the British series called Hitler's Circle of Evil, which is basically a 10-episode documentary series on Netflix that dives deep into all of the relationships surrounding Hitler, basically from World War One all the way to the end of World War Two. Now, I just got done finishing watching the first episode, and I'm going to be making a little short review video of each episode, kind of to review all of the main players, the characters that are in each episode, as well as the situations and everything that happens. So the first episode is called Heroes and Misfits, and I took some notes so I can talk about them because it's a lot of information. It's packed with information, but very interesting information. And basically, in the beginning, it talks about how there were these four main players, right? And the series or the episode is basically going to talk about them. Dietrich Eckart, Rudolf Hess, who becomes Hitler's first disciple, Heinrich Himmler, who was a wannabe soldier, and Hermann Goering. He was a soldier and he fought. He was a fighter pilot during World War One and also a World War One hero. So a lot of this stems from, as we all know, from this feeling of humiliation and betrayal by the German government. And a lot of the Germans during that time felt that they had been wronged, basically, after World War One. Okay, well, I'll get into that in a moment. But in this case, it starts off by talking about Goering. Goering is a natural leader, and he basically encourages at the end of World War One. He encourages his platoon, his soldiers, to fight till the end, right, for the fatherland. And I found this expression to be interesting because Russia says the motherland, and countries like Germany say the Vaterland, I think. So I was like, how come sometimes country is referred to as a father and sometimes as a mother? And that's interesting. And I asked ChatGPT, and of course it says because it has its origins in cultural differences, right? Like father is like discipline, kind of more structure like Germany, as opposed to Russia, which is maybe like more nurturing, also talking more maybe in terms of fields and crops, right? Like a mother that basically takes care of its children. So I found that distinction to be interesting. Anyway, this is the beginning of all this of World War II, because the end of World War One is the beginning of World War II, especially in Germany and with the Nazi Party, because Goering was willing to fight till the end with his fighter pilots. But then the Kaiser, who was the German leader at the time, he flees to Holland, right? And Goering is just kind of like, what the hell, right? So he gives this like speech to his platoon, we're going till the end, and then he gets a message saying like, yeah, just retreat, like we're surrendering. And I guess those are the first moments that the German people get that sense of betrayal by their government, right? And that humiliation and that feeling of they wronged us, right? And then we travel to Munich. Everything in this first episode basically takes place in Munich. Now, there's this dramatist, this writer, his name is Dietrich Eckart, and sorry if I mispronounce the names. But basically, there was a lot of, and I just asked ChatGPT about this, and ChatGPT says that there was a German Revolution happening during this time after World War One, and there was also the Russian Revolution, right? So there was like a lot of military chaos happening in Mexico. We had the Revolutionary War. I think all over the world there were just like a bunch of wars. It was crazy. Nowadays there's a bunch of wars too, but back then I guess it was with the key players, right? Like Europe, Russia, Mexico. So anyway, there's this beef, there's this tension between right and left wing people, extreme right wing, extreme left wing. And Eckart is this wealthy writer. He's well connected, and he's part of the Thule Society. So, I mean, the first attempted coup by the Nazi Party takes place in Bavaria, sorry. And Bavaria, I wanted to investigate what the deal was with Bavaria because I guess it was part of Germany, or it is part of Germany, but they wanted like independence. So there were like all sorts of things happening all over the place for different reasons. But anyway, I know that the Illuminati are part of Bavaria, and then you have the Thule Society, which Eckhart was a part of. So you know that he's well connected. But he had these ideas, Teutonic ideas, or Germanic or Aryan ideas, where he believed that the Aryans were the superior race, right? Like all the racism and the Jew and the anti-Semitism basically comes in with Eckhart. Eckhart, they say, is a very important. The historians in the documentary say he's a very important person, but uh, like nobody acknowledges him because Hitler was the face of the movement, but there were all these other key players that were doing a lot of things, especially Eckhart. Eckhart actually starts mentoring Hitler, and Eckhart basically believed that the Bolsheviks, the communists, and the Jewish were against the German people, right? And he has this like need to get his message across to the masses, past the elites, right? And then we cut back to Goering. Goering was the fighter pilot, and he's beat by the socialists. So I was like, how is he beat by the socialists when he then becomes a socialist, right? The party, the Socialist Movement Party, which is the Nazi party. Um, so I asked ChatGPT, and basically it says that yes, the socialists were there. They were more left wing, and since Goering represented like the establishment, the right wing, the military, and the government institutions, that's why he gets beat. But in the street, but eventually he joins the socialists more for his causes. And the Third Reich is the third power, the third way of doing things. So it combines kind of like an ideology of like revolution from the left, but with very right wing military conditions, right? So it's kind of interesting what the Third Reich was in its philosophy, so to say. Okay, anyway, Eckhart forms the Germans Workers' Party in 1919, so basically right after the First World War One, and there's a lot of political agitation. The party is seen as obnoxious but not really important, right? Because these guys would just gather in pubs, drink, and talk about revolution. And then the Versailles Treaty is signed, and it's disastrous for Germany because it basically charges Germany 260 billion gold markers, I think, which is like $860 billion nowadays. They take away all of Germany's colonies. Their assets are taken, and and part of their territory, part of the country, is taken from them. So it's like a big humiliation. And eventually, the Weimar Republic in 1919 gets formed, which to Eckhart is weak, right? So Eckhart is constantly looking for a messiah. He's very like poetic in this sense. And then this was interesting. I had watched this documentary before, but I hadn't paid attention to this. I don't know why. Supposedly Hitler gets introduced around this part of the episode, and he gets introduced as a spying in these pubs, right? Specifically in the Sternecker beer hall on September 12th, 1919. He's a spy, he's taking notes, but then he gets like influenced, or he agrees with what he's hearing there, and then he starts basically giving his speech, and he notices how people are reacting to it, and which they reacted positively to it. So yeah, all these guys are like drinking and stuff, but I found it interesting that Eckhart was drinking, and he was actually an alcoholic throughout his life, and Hitler was not so much, right? And then, so Eckhart sees in Hitler what he always wanted. And let me know in the comments if I'm right or wrong about this. Hitler didn't drink or smoke. And then we get introduced to Rudolf Hess. Rudolf Hess is a young university student, and he was also a soldier. So there are like a lot of soldiers around Hitler. And one of them is Rudolf Hess. He comes from a wealthy family, and he is captivated by Hitler. The historians narrate this as almost like a love affair. I don't know if they're exaggerating. And then we also get introduced to Heinrich Himmler, who turns 18 at the end of World War One. He wanted to be a soldier, but he couldn't because the war ended. So he basically lives frustrated with the dream of becoming a soldier, right? That's important for future references. Heinrich Himmler. Um, Historians throw a lot of shit at this guy. They basically say he's like socially awkward, he's aggressive and things like that, which I don't say he wasn't, but they just like throw a bunch of crap at him. And then they talk about blood and bloden, which is blood and soil, which I guess was an ideology from Himmler. Okay, so back to Hitler. Hitler is a rough stone, and Eckart starts like dressing him up. I thought this was kind of funny because he mentors him, he introduces him to people like at cocktail parties, but Hitler is like fiery, right? So he's like, giving these speeches, eating and talking, and all of the elites are like, whoa, like this guy is not refined like us, right? And Hitler's just like, bah. So I thought that was funny, and yeah, so he takes them to cocktail parties, but he develops his adequate. Eckhart starts to develop, he starts to refine and polish Hitler, right? And I'm going to explain in a moment how he does this. Hitler becomes head of propaganda. Propaganda is key, key, key. This is actually why I wanted to watch this documentary again, because of the propaganda. And Gobler is not in this first episode, but Gobler, I think, was like the mastermind behind the Nazi propaganda, right? Propaganda is huge with the Nazi party. So Hitler is the head of propaganda. Eckart, as a writer, polishes what Hitler basically rambles on about. And Hitler doesn't really write, he just speaks. He's an orator. And Eckart, being a writer, polishes Hitler's rambling speeches, and then he feeds them back to Hitler so he can, come back like more refined, clearer, more polished. So that's basically that. They say a mentoring relationship, a teacher student relationship, a father son relationship, a brother with brother relationship. So that's kind of interesting. And you see that Hitler had Eckart as his mentor, right, early on. So it's very interesting. They pledged to give back the land that they took from them and to stop paying the Allies money. So this kind of made me think of Ukraine, how like Russia has so far taken Ukraine's territory, and then if like there is eventually like a peace agreement, how Ukraine's gonna be resentful for that, kind of like Germany was after World War One. Also, well, like they say history repeats itself, so I'm thinking like, what does this have to do with like Ukraine, and why is this like emphasized, right? Also during World War One and Two, they always talk about how Germany was mad, and that's why they came back. That's why they say it's not that people were brainwashed by Hitler, it's that they really felt betrayed, and they were angry. The people really were angry, and they just needed a leader. But the people were angry because of the bad stick, or the bad side of the stick that they got after World War One, right, with the negotiations. So then the Eckart's chant becomes Deutschland erwache, which is Germany wake up or Germany awake. It's an emblem, and it gets its emblem here in this part established, believed by the Thule Society as a national social, no, as a symbol for the Aryans, right, which is the swastika, and then the National Socialist Workers' Party gets formed, which is the Nazi party. So in this part, Ernst Röhm comes in, Ernst Röhm, who's a soldier with weapons, and he's still part of the military. He loves war, but he has around 100,000 men, right? So he develops paramilitary groups, and he's very good like at smuggling weapons. So you see here that they actually have like a legit military guy with weapons, so they can, and men, so they can, physically do their cause, not just ideology. But Rome doesn't really, a lot of these guys like Rome and Goering, they saw Hitler not as their leader, but as a means to their own ends, right? They were like self-interested, and they were like, okay, we'll work with you for now. But Rome, actually being a military captain or commander, he saw himself above Hitler, right? So he was just like, yeah, I'll work with you, but I'm not your subordinate or whatever. And at this point, the Nazi Party sees Hitler only as a drummer boy or as a drummer to gather support. So he's not really like the leader yet. They're fewer, right? Eckhart is editor in chief of a newspaper, and he works with Rome. And he basically feeds Hitler's ego at this point, saying, he's the Messiah, he has mystical qualities, all this type of stuff. And then Rudolf Hess wants to honor and respect Hitler, and Rudolf Hess basically gets described as this like person that wanted to respect and honor Hitler, and how he was just like after him like the whole time, like the love affair thing that I mentioned earlier. And he actually coins the term der Führer, which is the leader, right? In July 1921, the party is in a crisis because the leader wants to merge with other parties. The leader of the Nazi party at this point was Antoine Drexler. And Hitler resigns, but it's actually like a political group move, right? He resigns to negotiate, so he has all the leverage, and he basically says, if you guys want me back, you have to let me come back, but with dictatorial ruling powers, right? And everybody agrees, and he comes back, and they kick out Drexler, right? So that was kind of interesting. Then the storm section, which is actually called the Sturmabteilung, yeah, I'm not pronouncing that right. The stormtrooper section gets formed with Rome with 300 soldiers, but they're a mess basically at first, and Rome can't really control them. So Goering returns, and Goering kind of takes charge of the storm section, which I think this is kind of like the stormtroopers in Star Wars, and the fact that they're clumsy, I guess, is on purpose. I'm not sure if this is right, but it would make sense because at first the storm section, the paramilitary group, was kind of clumsy, but then Goering made it like a formidable group, right? A formidable paramilitary group. So Goering doesn't completely agree with Hitler, but he goes along with it, right? Like I mentioned, they see Hitler as a means to an end. And Hess recruits more members, while Rome secures the military army training secretly. Goering returns to the Sturmabteilung, the storm section with the 300 troops, and he turns them into a formidable force at this point, right? Eckart is getting kicked out. Meanwhile, like they're just, Eckart, I guess, is like just drinking himself to death, and he's all theory. They basically say like he's just all talk, he's all ideas, but he's not actually gonna do anything. We're the ones that are gonna do stuff. So at this point, like all the pieces are in set, and they're ready for their first attempted coup, right, or revolutionary blow or whatever. So yeah, Eckhart's just drinking. He blames Hitler for having a messiah complex when really he's the one that was telling him about it. And Rome at this point is catching attention from his commanders, and he basically needs to choose whether he's going to be with the Nazi party or whether he's going to stay with the government, right? Himmler meets with Rome, right? At this point, Himmler is the wannabe soldier, and he meets with Rome, the military guy who has the weapons, right? And Rome introduces Himmler to the Nazi party, and he becomes member 14,303 in August 1923. So then they get hit, Germany gets hit with hyperinflation in 1922 and 1923. The Ruhr is seized by, I think, French and Polish forces or something like that, because Germany doesn't pay, which the Ruhr is an industrial heartland, and this is a humiliation for the Germans. So then in 1923, they say, let's go for the coup, right? And on September 26, 1923, Goering resigns from the army. Just a couple of months earlier, Mussolini had taken power in Italy, and they see how he did this with 30,000 men. So then Goering says, that's how we have to do it. We just have to take it by force. We're not going to get the popular vote or anything like that. So their plan is to take Bavaria first and then go after Berlin, the capital, right? And Bavaria has Bavaria, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, has three key people: the head of the police, the head of the military, and the state prime minister, Gustav von Kahr, right? So Hitler is unknown to outside of Munich, right? So they need someone, and they get Erich Ludendorff, right? Because he has a nationwide appeal, basically. And then at the same time, they're afraid that these three key people in Bavaria want their independence from Germany, so they are gonna get together at a pub to talk about this, and they do in effect talk about independence. So this is bad for the Nazi Party because they're trying to take over. Mm, excuse me. So Goering and the Nazis move in Burger Brau Keller. Burger Brau Keller, I think that's what it's called. Um, and Hitler eventually gets there. He starts talking to the three key people. They basically take over. Goering takes over the bar. He puts the bar on lockdown. He gets his men in there. And, Hitler walks in and he starts negotiating in the back room with these three key people. Um, and Goering's like joking in the bar or whatever. But these three key people are not having it, right? They're just like, no, we don't care. We're not swayed. We're not persuaded by you, Hitler. We don't even know who you are, right? And then Rome marches on the Barbarian War Ministry, right, outside of the bar, with Himmler carrying a flag behind him. So the SA units in this case have control. Hitler lies, says that they have the support of the government, and then Lunderhoff walks in, right? So supposedly they have it all under control at this stage. Then Hitler meets with Rome, so he leaves because it's all under control at this stage. But Gustav von Kahr, the prime minister of Bavaria, convinces Lunderhoff, the nationwide appeal military leader, to let him go. And he says basically like, we'll keep up our end of the bargain, just let us go. And Lunderhoff lets them go. At this point, Eckart knows nothing, right? Eckart is Hitler's mentor. He knows nothing of this, and he learns about it through like a phone call. And then effectively, he's like, yeah, like von Kahr is gonna screw you guys over, like, and he does. He rallies an army, and the coup is stalled, right? So at this point, Lunderhoff takes charge one last time. He's like, okay, I'm gonna take charge with Hitler along with Eckart, and I think Goering. They walk into like the downtown area, and basically they get shot up, right? And then it's a total disaster. Goering is shot. Hitler almost gets shot. Eckart is there. 16 Nazis are killed. Hitler, again, barely almost dies. And the coup is a disaster. Goering ends up going to Austria, and so does Hermann Hesse. Himmler goes back to his mom's house because he's not that known or dangerous at that moment or important. I think he must have been like 19, 20. And Rome and Hitler are thrown in jail, and the party is disbanded, right? So later on, they talk about how this is going to become like a triumphant struggle, and that might go hand in hand with Mein Kampf, which is My Struggle, written by Hitler, right? And they see that they have to do this by democratic means, right? And I think this is where they get more, because I know that Hitler wrote My Struggle in jail. So at this point, they're at their lowest, right? They attempted to do this, but they're at their lowest, and then they're like, okay, we're gonna have to do this through other means. We're gonna have to get smart about this. It's not all about bras and brawn, right? Like they say, it's not all about the physical strength. We're gonna have to figure out how to really do this, right? And 6 weeks after the failed coup, Eckart dies as the puppet master, and the narrator was saying basically how this Eckart's death, who's like the father of the Nazi ideology, he basically this marks the end of the first act of the Nazis. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Again, I'm going to be breaking down each episode as we go through this. I just thought I'd let you know their zodiac signs in case you're interested. Adolf Hitler, Dietrich Eckart, and Erich Lunderhoff are actually all Ariuses. Rudolf Hess is a Taurus. I forget if I got mixed up. I may have gotten the names mixed up because I was saying Hermann Hesse. No, Hermann Hesse is the author. This is Rudolf Hess. Sorry about that. Rudolf Hess. Rudolf Hess is a Taurus. Heinrich Himmler is a Libra. Hermann Goering is a Capricorn. And Ernst Röhm, just as Gustav von Kahr, is a Sagittarius. So in this case, I think Von Kahr got lucky because Sagittarius is a lucky sign. And because he escaped from the bar after Goering had come in there, right? Goering being a Capricorn, like he had that on lockdown administratively, right? Categorically. So yeah, right now I'm just refreshing my mind with these facts, with these ideas. It's very complex, all of this. I really don't know anything about that. Sorry if I screwed up during the video. But yeah, I hope as these videos progress, they'll get better and better. And it does get better and better, especially with the whole Goebbels thing and manipulation and using mass media and misinformation to influence the masses. I think that's the really good part. But anyway, this is my review for right now. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one, okay? Peace.